It's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into some of the key issues in the spotlight right now. Outdoor mask mandates have been lifted for most situations across the country since last week. Now, while most people still choose to wear their masks over concerns on the Omicron variants, others have enjoyed some freedom during the warmer temperatures.
But with concerns over new subvariants of Omicron, will South Korea delay future plans for lifting indoor mask mandates? For some hints, we turn to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at MizMedi's Women's Hospital, joining us this morning. Good morning, Dr. Tan. And well, first off, it's been a week since South Korea lifted outdoor mask mandates. And well, what's your assessment of the situation? Is it too early to tell if it's going to increase the number of infected patients?
Well, thank you for having me. In terms of the outdoor mask mandates, it's thought that outdoor transmission accounts for less than 10% of all cases, which sounds like a small number, but given that the cumulative case numbers in Korea, more than 17 million, that's maybe 1.7 million cases that could have been prevented or were caused by outdoor transmission. Even though the outdoor mask mandate was lifted, what I'm finding is that there's still many people inside the city, Seoul proper, who are deciding to keep their masks on. In terms of the timing, I think that yes, it is usually a matter of time before we see an increase in cases that reflect a change in policy. So we may see after maybe a week or two an increase in cases again. Hopefully we won't, but it is, I think it's only been a week, so we do need to wait a little bit more.
All right, so now that the outdoor mask mandates have been lifted, I guess the next step would be the indoor mask mandates. When do you think would be the right time to start lifting the indoor mask mandates?
So when we lift an indoor mask mandate, what this makes it's the community becomes much more dangerous for people who are vulnerable. So that would be the elderly, people with chronic medical conditions, immunocompromised, and anyone who's not been vaccinated. And of course, we need to remember that our children, the youngest of the young, have not been vaccinated against COVID-19. And we should remember that even yesterday, there was one more child fatality. And so this increases the cumulative number of deaths in children between the age of 0 and 19 to 29 now, which is a tenfold increase compared to where we were at the beginning of the Omicron wave. So the situation remains dangerous still for anyone who's not vaccinated, and that would include children. Less than 2% of all children between the ages of 0 to 12 years has been vaccinated with one dose. And so I would like to see more children protected against COVID-19 before we see lifting of indoor mask mandates.
Dr. Tan, we're hearing more and more about these subvariants of Omicron, the BA4, the BA5 reported in the US, and it sounds like it's only a matter of time before we hear about detected cases in South Korea. So what can you tell us about these variants?
So the BA.4, BA.5 subvariants are subvariants of Omicron, and they have two mutations that are known to cause an increase in transmissibility, and that's what seems to be going on. They seem to be maybe 10% more transmissible even than the BA.2 subvariant. They seem to be leading an increase in cases in South Africa, in the US, perhaps in the UK as well. In terms of whether or not our vaccines work against these subvariants, it looks like the vaccines still offer protection against severe disease when infected with BA4, BA5, but we still need to wait in terms of how virulent these strains are in people who are unvaccinated. In terms of treatments, we think that our current treatments will still work against these subvariants, but anytime we have a subvariant that is more transmissible than the previous variants, then it is just a matter of time before it gains dominance. And when it becomes much more transmissible, as we saw with Omicron in South Korea, that means more people are likely to get infected. People who have had a prior infection also may be vulnerable to reinfection. And so this is a cause for concern, and I think this is one of the reasons why we need to keep up high levels of genetic surveillance so that we're able to track new variants as they enter our country.
So, I mean, let's talk about the vaccines then. What's your recommendation for the second booster shots for the non-high-risk population? I mean, should we still get our second booster shots? If, let's say for myself, I've already got my booster shot, should I still get my second booster shot even if I have already contracted COVID-19?
Well, if you've had COVID-19, what we're finding with the BA4, BA5 subvariants is when they compared people who had been vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and then also having had a history of infection, people who had been infected but also were vaccinated seemed to have higher levels of neutralizing antibody against BA4 compared to people who had infection but no history of prior vaccination. So given the fact that we're seeing more and more variants on the horizon, COVID's not over, protection from previous doses is waning, I think it is a good idea to get the second booster. In my case, I'm considered low risk, but as a doctor, I'm around patients who might be vulnerable. Also, it's graduation season. I will be attending graduation ceremonies, therefore I'll be traveling, I'll be mingling with other people. Also, I will be with my parents, I'll be with my 99-year-old grandmother. I don't want to be the one who inadvertently gets COVID and then spreads it to people who may be vulnerable. So in my case, I got my second booster 2 days ago. And so right now it's, people have a case-by-case way of deciding whether or not to get the second dose, at least in the United States. But I think for people who need to not just protect themselves, but protect others around them who might be vulnerable to COVID, it's a good idea to get the second booster.
Thank you as always, Dr. Tan, for your insights. We'll speak to you again next week.
Thank you.